All right, Kinesiology 223, Chapter 23, Children's Sports Psychology, presentation number 4. We're talking effective coaching practices for youth athletes. And you have these coaching young athletes implications for practice around 582 to 584. So often coaches do this and they fall victim to just going with what they know and what they learned when they were playing league baseball or they're playing in youth football. And sometimes these coaching practices are outdated and they're just not designed for youth athletes. And I mentioned this before. I talked about the Positive Coaching Alliance. That's down here, PCA. It's wonderful for working with coaches who many times these individuals they work a full-time job. They may have 3 kids at home with their wife, and they have to take the kid to football practice, or they volunteer as a coach on the kids' football team, and they know nothing about the sport, or they know a lot about the sport, but they just don't know how to coach it. The PCA is a wonderful, wonderful organization to learn more, to be a better coach and be able to interact with coaches in a positive way. The book references research specific to coaching and coaches learning effective coaching practices and implementing those into the practice environment. And coaches who gave technical instruction and coaches who used more reinforcement and mistake contingent technical instruction were highly rated, meaning the athletes had a greater appreciation for the coaches who provide the technical instruction and the ones who reinforce the behavior. So what you have is this kind of positive feedback loop and positive reinforcement and mistake contingent encouragement positively affected postseason self-esteem measures. So, your athletes are going to make mistakes. That's part of coaching. Teaching is coaching. Coaching is teaching. And now as a coach, you have to be able to take what is a mistake and make it a positive. You remember the Oreo cookie example where you have I like what you're doing, change this on your swing, keep going, you're doing great with your hitting. It's that 3-sentence sandwich of like good, bad, good, where you're trying to have a coaching cue somewhere in that mix. And I'm just going to break this out to the side here. They have this tool, this coaching behavior assessment system, and CBAS here, that's listed in chapter 10. The researchers interviewed 542 players about their Little League baseball experiences, and that's where they came up with the data regarding this down here in terms of positive reinforcement, mistake contingent encouragement. So I urge you, as you develop your own coaching style, to make sure you come up with these little key bullet points in your strategies to be able to work with your athletes. So coaches, in this study, what you see is this. Unfortunately, the first phase did not show that the coaching behaviors actually changed the athlete's perceptions, only that these factors were correlated. So in the second phase, they assigned 32 baseball coaches either to a control, in which they coached as they always have done, or to an experimental coaching program in which they received training based on results of the first phase. The experimental group received guidelines on desirable coaching behaviors, saw these behaviors modeled, and were monitored until they had increased the frequency of encouraging remarks by 25%. The controlled group just did whatever they did before. Now, when you look at this, compared to the players in the control group, the players in the experimental group rated their coaches as better teachers, and they liked their teammates better, etc. So what you see here is the experimental group, by just having a little bit more encouraging remarks, 25% more, it increased things like they like their coaches more. They show greater positive change in self-esteem. In this part of the research, this 2-step or second step in the research process, identified that coaching behaviors, they're associated with positive psychological development in children. So I say it again and again and again. You're going to be a coach. You need to be able to control that. You need to create the culture that actually delivers that in the practice environment. So, remarks from coaches must not only be positive, but also be sincere. So you can't just be like, Johnny, nice job, way to go. I mean, you got to be, as a coach, you have to not only deliver those comments, but be effective in how you deliver them. And excuse me, when you have good performances and bad performances, you have to you have to offer feedback on the bad performances. It's just part of coaching, but it's how you deliver that feedback, right? And you're providing encouragement and you're providing like actionable items to help your athlete become better. And it's very much like that Oreo cookie example. And it's a case where if you do this effectively, you're going to have um, greater efficacy in terms of your athletes being better. They're going to be more competent in what they're doing. They're more confident in what they're doing, and they're going to enjoy what they're doing more, and they're going to look at you more positively as a coach. So, in this regard, um, you know, just to kind of encapsulate down here, these 4 bullet points provide higher rates of informationally based and positive feedback, deliver feedback in autonomy supported versus controlling fashion, facilitate a growth mindset, and deliver feedback in a way to create and sustain sport environments that are free from bias. And those are kind of some nice touch points, right? So you have a lower player dropout rate, so you're able to retain your players better when you use this as a coaching tool. And it's also, let me go down to this last little sentence we caught down here. Players taught by coaches who use a positive mastery-oriented approach to coaching reported decreased anxiety over the course of a playing season. So one can see how if you implement this type of strategy into a practice environment with your athletes on a team, how it could be a benefit across the board. So with those 3 groups that are the groups that we talked about before with the intervention, you have one where they place 3 groups. You have the positive mastery approach, you have control, and then you have placebo who received training but not related to the intervention. And they found that the athletes who played right here, played for the trained coaches, reported greater amounts of task and social cohesion. And this is important because task and social cohesion are related to positive youth development in teams in terms of outcome, such as greater personal and social skills, enhanced goal setting, and increased initiative. So it's just interesting how they ended up having 3 groups. And even with that, the trained group, the group of coaches who learned these skills had a positive outcome. Can't stress it enough. Furthermore, with the research, there's a lot of research studies here. This was a review of literature, if I remember correctly, on how transformational leadership research could inform youth sports coaching. Jesus, that's a mouthful. A review focusing on how transformational leadership research could inform youth sports coaching resulted in a model linking transformational leadership and psychosocial outcomes. So this is a mouthful. I'm going to kind of look at it over here. What they're talking about, transformational leadership could inform youth sports coaching. So you have this body of people who are sport coaches. And like when I coached with PAFA brought in the Positive Coaching Alliance to teach coaches how to be better coaches. And so you have this kind of mindset where you can actually bring in an entire philosophy to an entire coaching staff within a program and create a very positive environment for the athletes because you have coaches who are all on board across the board. That's really what they're getting at here in terms of transformational leadership. And I wish it wasn't in terms of a word salad like they put here. All right, transformational leadership. You have these 3 main ways that it influences psychosocial outcomes. And one is the interpersonal level, where changes occur in the emotions, self-perceptions, and task perceptions of the follower. And the interpersonal level, where the changes result from the quality of leader-follower relations. And then you have the environmental level, resulting in team climate and culture changes. And I will say this again, if you have an entire program, all of PAFA buys into something like this, it ends up kind of transcending across the board, all the levels and all the teams. Now, I can't say that every other town in the northwest suburbs of Chicago did the same thing. I don't know if Buffalo Grove Bison or the Arlington Heights Cowboys or whatever, had the same kind of programming, but I can tell you in terms of PAFA, it certainly made a difference, and I think it helped out many of the coaches who were there. All right, so the book goes into 12 coaching guidelines. These start on page 584, and I'm going to just kind of list them here in this slide and the next slide. They really set the foundation for a positive coaching environment. Just affirmations, instructional supportive, autonomy supportive behaviors. I'll let you kind of pause and read through these, but you're going to recognize some of the stuff like give praise sincerely. And then when we get into here, you may have to kind of blow this up and snap this open so you can see it a little bit better. Let me do this so you can get to it. You can see here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we go over to the other page here. You have, and I'll just pause there for a second so you can actually see that. Let me get my face out of the way so you can read it. And you got 6, 7, and 8 there. If we go over to here, we spill over into this page where we have 11 and 12. So with this, you might want to take a moment and just kind of reflect on a few of these, if nothing else, for your own coaching going forward. There's not too much in terms of tests or quizzing that you see, but I think a lot of this stuff is pretty darn important in terms of becoming a coach and your interactions you're going to have with your athletes, especially so if they're going to be youth athletes. All right, so I'm going to get myself out of the way because it's the end of this presentation.